since the end of July, I have been speaking to several court and crime and justice experts, criminologists, former detectives, investigative journalists, asking the question, is South Africa a mafia state? Is the rot so deep that criminality and politics go hand in hand? And it is a mixed perception. There's not one single person who has told me, well, yes, we are. It's always been, well, kind of, not yet, it depends. But regardless of whether we're a mafia state or not, what is certain is the public's lack of confidence in the state and the public's lack of confidence in those who are meant to keep us safe. The Human Science Research Council found that just this last year, only 22% of South Africans have trust in the South African police service. That's the lowest in the last 27 years, almost our entire post-94 democracy moment. And what this and how this is quite evident is that just yesterday reports that 4 recent vigilante killings in the Khayelitsha area. In 1 week in Kraaifontein during September, we had 14 people killed because of suspected vigilante, as a result of suspected vigilante killings. And it all just brings back, it reminds me of the 2014 Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry, which then already flagged the lack of police response and the breakdown in community police trust. Joining me now is Dr. Jean Redpah, Senior Researcher at the Africa Criminal Justice Reform Project at the Dullah Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape. She was also part of that commission leading evidence at the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry. She joins me now on the line. Jean, thanks so much for being on the line with us. 4 killings in Khayelitsha, 14 in 1 week in the Kraaifontein area. Are these isolated incidents, or are we seeing a dangerous trend in the rise of vigilantism spreading across Cape Town? Good morning.
Good morning, Lester. I think what we should really focus on is the total number of murders in those kind of areas. And if we look at the 3 policing areas which fall under the broader Khayelitsha region, we can expect between 500 and 600 murders every year. That is more than you get in the United Kingdom, in England and Wales in a whole year. In an entire country's worth of murders in 3 policing areas. That area covers about 500,000 people. But what we saw in the Khayelitsha Commission is that the way in which the police allocate resources to an area like that is simply not in line with that picture. It's not even in line with the population. Even today in 2024, the latest data I have is 2024, approximately 7% of the Western Cape population falls in those 3 areas. They have 5% of the numbers of police resources. Approximately 12% of all murders fall in that area, but they only have 5% of the numbers of police officers. Now, this is an ongoing situation. We even had a court case in which I gave expert evidence, which the applicants, the Social Justice Coalition, won, in which the police were instructed to adjust their formula. And we don't see any change even today, almost 10 years later of the commission.
Yeah, because at that time, 10 years ago, at the Khayelitsha Commission, you said Khayelitsha needs hundreds more officers. You also have explained that if you look at an area like Camps Bay, has almost 9 times more police per resident than the community of Harare in Khayelitsha. Is this pure economics? Is this pure the state looking after those who are seen to be more valuable to the market? Is this just plain old spatial inequality that we're seeing here?
Well, what I found out in my investigation of the situation is that it was not intentional at the time anyway. There is a formula which is applied to determine the theoretical number of resources. And then each station gets about 2/3 of the theoretical number. Now, the problem lies with the formula. The formula relies on reported crime. Now, if you're in an area like Khayelitsha or Harare, where people have completely lost faith in policing, they simply do not report crime to the police in the way that a more empowered community who is well insured, etc., will report crime. And the police don't look at the ratio of murders to crime and go, okay, we seem to have a problem here. Something like 20% of all our crime is murder. That cannot be. There must be some hidden assaults, hidden robberies, etc., that we're just not seeing. Unfortunately, the formula doesn't do that. It does have adjustment factors, but 150 of these adjustment factors are factors that you would find in a more formal area, such as the existence of schools and malls, etc., which push those numbers up. So I could very clearly tell, and I've had subsequent meetings with the police via the court order, with the officials involved, explaining to them where their formula goes wrong. And they now understand it. They now understand it.
But
They're unable to fix it.
But maybe explain as simply as possible how a formula could tell me that Khayelitsha of, I don't know, probably 1 million people requires fewer resources than the Atlantic seaboard, which at most could be maybe 10 of 1,000 people. How would a formula tell me that there should be more police in Camps Bay than in Harare?
Well, precisely. So what the formula does is it counts the number of actions that the police have to take, and that includes people coming to report crime, people coming to get their affidavits certified, etc. And it adds that all up into a whole lot of minutes, and it comes out saying that the more formal areas are consuming more resources from the police and therefore need more people.
So you're saying that someone that lives in the suburbs is more likely, and this comes down to, again, the conversation of police community trust. Someone in the suburbs is more likely to report a crime, and that may be some form of petty burglary, something that I need proof of for insurance purposes, is more likely to report a crime, whereas in Khayelitsha, Nyanga, there's more contact crime, violent crime. Yeah. You're being mugged and stabbed for your phone. You're less likely to even report that crime, and therefore that then skews police statistics based on what I think is directly public mistrust in police.
Exactly, and it's a negative cycle. You've got it in 5 minutes, and it's taken the police 10 years not to get it. It's a negative cycle. Once you realize that the police aren't going to do anything, or that you have to stand in a queue at the police station, etc., you're not going to report, and so then that area gets fewer resources, and so it goes. And whereas if you're in another area and you find, well, there's no queue here, look, I can just walk straight to the counter, I can report my the smash and grab, and insurance will then pay, and you're not actually interested in it being investigated by the police, you're just reporting it, then it's a completely different picture. And this actually applies to the whole country, but it was particularly exacerbated in the Western Cape because there was this big differential in reporting between the formal areas and the more informal areas.
So how do you go from then, I don't want to report my mugging in Khayelitsha or in Kraaifontein because I don't think I'm going to get any police action, to a group of community members saying, we are so distrustful about a criminal justice system, we're going to teach someone a lesson, and we may even, if needs be, take someone's life in a extrajudicial killing?
Well, typically what you have is someone who is a serially terrorizing the community, and it happens again and again and again and again, and maybe the first or second time you report to the police, but nothing happens. And eventually people will take the law into their own hands. That is one of the topics that was looked at in detail in the Khayelitsha Commission. And the police's then excuse was, well, we don't have enough resources to investigate, which is what then prompted this investigation into the allocation of resources. And I have to add that it's not just the police, it's the whole system now that is failing the people of Khayelitsha. I've had recently looked at court data, and you see 1,000 convictions over about 15 months, and you think, oh, that's good. But then you go and look, and 85% of those were cautions for drug possession. That is not what is going to make a difference to the people of Khayelitsha and Harare and Lingulethu West. It's a what you want is the serious offences being processed through the system. So we have a kind of shell state happening where all the we've got the police vehicles charging around in the mornings with people from Pollsmoor and dropping them off at court, and the whole court infrastructure, but it's not producing the kind of results that are going to make a difference to people on the ground.
I ask you this more for a psychological or sociological answer than a criminologist answer. I'm not exposed to daily violence. I like every other South African, if I walk down a main street, I walk with maybe a 50-meter stare, but I'm not exposed to daily violence. I've not been desensitized to gunshots and stabbings, thankfully and luckily. But maybe if you can take us into, if you've maybe interviewed people who've been involved in vigilante mob justice, why is it so easy to then equally inflict violence on someone else, and if in some cases maybe even take a life? Is it simply because violence is desensitized in areas that I do not currently live, Jean?
Yeah, so I think that there is a degree of desensitization which has occurred with our population, but you also cannot predict how you will react, how an individual will react on being accosted. I have had some mugging incidences, and I surprised myself by fighting back and running after people. Stupid, not to be recommended for anybody, but people don't know what they will do, and there may be instances where it wasn't intended, but then there's a need to cover up the evidence, and people then burn the body, or etc., in order to try and hide what happened. So I think what concerns me also is the jump of the police assuming that this was a vigilante killing rather than these were all vigilante killings rather than self-defense or something like that, some other scenario, which tells me that they know that these people are criminals, which tells me that why didn't you do anything about it? And so it is a very frustrating situation. And I can imagine the frustration of communities who are serially terrorized in these communities.
Dr. Jean Redpah, really appreciate your time, senior researcher at the Africa Criminal Justice Reform Project at the University of the Western Cape.